Thank you so much, Rose, Stephanie, and Sierra. My name is Maeve O'Rourke. I am once again joined by Jake Muller. I hope that Sierra and Aaron took great care of you guys for those exciting rounds because we have another banger.
Yeah, I am very excited for this next match. These are two players that have already proven themselves as very strong contenders. They've both done very well at past tournaments. Both of them past regional finalists, at least. I know that Nails has won a couple regionals, Nick Navarre has won a couple regionals, and Z has gotten second. The last time we had a regional in Tennessee, I believe, was in Knoxville 3 years ago.
Yeah, 2019?
Yes.
Yes,
yeah.
2019. 4 years ago.
Yeah, I did math wrong, didn't I?
Yeah, no. The sun as well, but looking at it, it is Great Tusk and Torkoal in the lead, already boosting some photosynthesis here, and Cerulege and Mousehold. So Torkoal's Drought, this is going to help that partner Pokemon with the photosynthesis, boosting the attack there, which is what I assumed it would be, but I had to double check.
It's very hard to boost speed on Great Tusk. I don't even know if it's possible, actually, just because its attack is so naturally high. But I think this is a really strong start for Nick. You see the Cerulege and Mousehold right away, but the Great Tusk really great into that because it is carrying that move Earthquake. So if Nick wants to go for an Earthquake to bypass the possible Follow Me and deter Cerulege from sticking around without protecting or bulking up or anything like that, he has that option for him immediately.
Yeah, I mean, you can always swap in the Dragonite for the Torkoal. It's a really free Earthquake. You don't even have to worry about trying to protect through it. And then even still, right, then you have the opportunity for some extreme speeds into the Mousehold on the following turn. Gives you at least a little bit of damage often. And then if you're taking a Bitter Blade, you're taking it at not very effective because of the Dragon typing as well, which is really nice. So it definitely, I think, helps. Torkoal is going to switch out here, is instead going to be bringing in that Dragonite. Yeah, the Dragonite coming in here just to help, I think, be a great positional Pokemon. Terastallization is already going to be starting here, and I believe that this is on Nick's side as well. Yeah, so that Terastallization on that Great Tusk, turning it into the ground type to boost the power of these moves like Earthquake and Headlong Rush, and also get rid of that fighting typing, which is pretty nice to have when you're dealing with some Pokemon that are doing a lot of damage on the opposite side. Cerulege just going to protect here, play it a little bit safe. Looks like this Mousehold going for the Baby Doll Eyes, which is such a fun move. It drops that attack stat on these Pokemon, but thanks to, you know, that booster energy, it's not fully at neutral because it only boosts by 30%, but you're still doing some big damage here. Earthquake just into this Mousehold with this ground Terastallization, and, you know, with the booster energy to kind of help negate some of that damage, does a lot to the Mousehold, but Mousehold is still so bulky. Yeah, and that's a good turn for Z there, just because you make sure that you're not going to take a full-powered Earthquake. That Baby Doll Eyes is going to be huge on Mousehold because should the Mousehold survive an extreme speed from Dragonite, if that's the option Nick goes for, it will be able to get the Great Tusk down to -2, and especially if the Cerulege is trained to be faster than that Great Tusk, it should be able to get a bulk up off against a -2 attack Great Tusk, and in that case, an Earthquake probably still does a big chunk of damage. Like, let's not pretend it's not going to, but it's less than you would otherwise see, and certainly not a one-hit knockout. Yeah, another Baby Doll Eyes into that Great Tusk is going to lower that attack even further. Is going for another Earthquake into the Cerulege. It does a really good chunk. It's enough to knock that Mousehold out. So if Dragonite can find a way to clean up the Cerulege in turn 1, it is going to be really helpful. Ice Spinner targeting down into that Cerulege, not very effective. Is just a nice way to get some damage off. Bitter Blade into this Great Tusk. Critical hit does a lot of damage. That is huge to heal up some of that damage you just took on your Cerulege from that Earthquake. Yeah, taking a big chunk from Earthquake, but that's a big Bitter Blade, and especially a big critical hit because you do heal up so much more damage. Unfortunately, Dragonite really not poised to do too much damage to Cerulege at all. We saw that Ice Spinner do barely anything, and without the Terastallization, the Terra Blast is a normal type move, as is Extreme Speed. So Ice Spinner actually the only way Dragonite can damage that Cerulege. This Iron Bundle, though, very strong position for it. The Great Tusk and the Dragonite really do not want to be taking Ice-type attacks, and this is going to clear a lot of space for the Cerulege, especially if you're able to knock out that Great Tusk with something like a Freeze Dry, and then start setting up some bulk ups. This Iron Bundle also is Terra Ghost, right? Yes. Which does help as well with the same exact issue that Dragonite is facing, where it may have to go for something like an Ice Spinner, not do as much damage as it would like to do, instead of having the opportunity to go for something like that Extreme Speed. But that just depends on if Z is willing to commit their Terastallization onto the Iron Bundle versus if they want to save it for their last Pokemon in back. Great Tusk, though, is taking a couple of Baby Doll Eyes. It is ready to get out of here. Come back in a little later. Torkoal once again coming in, a Pokemon that would definitely handle something like a Bitter Blade pretty well, and an Icy Wind. Doesn't mind moving pretty slow. Super effective on the Dragonite, though. Some pretty nice damage. Even, you know, dealing with just a little bit of chip move here. You get the speed drop as well. There was no extreme speed from this Dragonite. Bitter Blade targeting down into this Torkoal handles that like a champ. You are not going to be getting nearly as much HP back as you did in that last turn with a big critical hit there. This means most likely it is another Ice Spinner here. Terra Blast normal actually targets down into the Iron Bundle here. Doesn't do a lot of damage at this point, but it's still a nice call.
Yeah, interestingly enough, Terra Blast is a special type attack until you Terrastalize, so extreme speed, about the same base. I believe we're both 80 base power, but Iron Bundle has a lot more defense than special defense. So that's likely why you saw Nick opt for that Terra Blast there. Again, this Rulage still poised very well. This Torkoal, if it carries something like Earth Power, does threaten it, but it did take a bunch of damage coming in from that Icy Wind and that Bitter Blade. Looks like it is carrying Earth Power, yeah. So we do have to worry about that if you're this Rulage. But again, this Rulage kind of sitting in front of this Dragonite saying, you can't touch me. Like, what are you going to do about it? As we've seen this Rulage do a couple times on stream today, Torkoal doesn't want to take a Hydro Pump. Even in the sun, that'll do a lot of damage, especially in conjunction with something like a Bitter Blade again, should Z opt for that.
Extreme speed into the Iron Bundle does do a pretty nice chunk. The Iron Bundle, though, Hydro Pump, it hits into that Torkoal. It's enough to knock out, even with that sun up to try and help it here. Dragonite is going to be taking a Bitter Blade from the Cerulege. Is a good chunk of damage. There's still no bulk ups on the Cerulege either. It's still handling itself very well and is nearly back at full after all of the damage it has regained.
Well, there are surely times where it's been very tempting for Z to click Bitter Blade in this game, but I think what they've done very well is know that they need some chip damage on a lot of these Pokemon to prime KOs for this Iron Bundle, especially that Torkoal that came in. You saw it come in on an Icy Wind and a Bitter Blade. If it just took that Icy Wind, there's maybe a chance it could have survived a Hydro Pump, but thanks to that Bitter Blade damage, it looked less impactful than it really was, because surely from that range where Torkoal was on this turn, Hydro Pump would have been enough for KO. So instead of bulking up, just making sure that Z is getting enough damage on the field as they possibly can to set up the rest of their team later on.
Great Tusk is coming back in here. It is in a pretty good spot, except for the fact that it's slower than the Iron Bundle. Will still get that photosynthesis boost to its attack because the sun is still up. I believe the sun's only up for maybe one more turn here. You have to hope for a Hydro Pump miss. Well,
a Freeze Dry should knock it out too, but
True.
The thing is, extreme speed from Dragonite may be a possible roll onto the Iron Bundle. However, we did see Z just lock in that Terra Ghost, so that seems like a pretty unpunishable play there. Yeah, the Terra Ghost avoids the extreme speed. Great Tusk, there's no way it outspeeds this Iron Bundle, and that leaves Rulage just facing down the Dragonite again.
We've seen a lot of Iron Bundle builds, right? We've seen a lot of the Terra Ice ones, but the Terra Ghost still has so much use in this format because you've got a lot of these big Pokemon running around with those normal type attacks. It is Terra Ghost here, and if it takes this extreme speed, then you're looking really comfy. No extreme speed though. Freeze Dry into that Great Tusk easily enough to get that knockout here, right? And now you've gotten rid of the next biggest threat. You're still going to find out whatever Nick's last Pokemon in the back is. He has not yet revealed it, so it's still something at full HP. You know, the Cerulege finally getting that bulk up off as well is going to get that attack and defense boost. A pretty free turn to do so because you're most likely just taking an Ice Spinner. Ice Spinner goes into the Iron Bundle as well. It is enough for the knockout, which is great because you've gotten rid of the fast threat. So if Nick has a Pokemon in back that can handle getting some moves off first, you might be looking pretty good.
A very smart play from both players, I would say. That's just there's no way that turn can go very wrong for Z. Like this was essentially worst case, where the Iron Bundle gets hit by an Ice Spinner and gets knocked out anyway. But that just means you clear up a space for the Dragonite here. Flutter Mane, it might be able to close this out, but a +1 Shadow Sneak is still going to be really rough. I love that Ice Spinner from Nick though, just because it covers that Terra Ghost in the Iron Bundle that was a little bit telegraphed from Z in the sense that they had to preserve that bundle. That's a big KO.
That is a one-hit knockout there. Thank you, Bulk Up. If you are Cerulege, you get that big knockout on that Flutter Mane. Nice to have that priority. Your Ice Spinner goes first, easily enough to knock out that Dragonite. Z wrapping that game up very comfortably in a situation where it could have gone a couple of different ways. So definitely back and forth that entire match.
The end of that game was really back and forth. I think that Shadow Sneak KOing a Flutter Mane in one hit, I'd be surprised if that happened without that bulk up. So like we were talking about, Z getting a lot of damage on the field with that Bitter Blade, not bulking up too early, just making sure enough damage is on the field to set up that end game, but knowing when to click bulk up and knowing that it needed that bulk up most likely for that KO onto the Flutter Mane really paid off for Z. I think that was expertly done.
Looking at the two Pokemon that did not come for Z, do you think Nick's counterplay is to bring something like that Kingambit? Because Great Tusk did not come, and it feels a little bit safer having the opportunity to go for some dark type moves. It still doesn't want to take a Bitter Blade, but I think the Kingambit itself does I think it gives you a little bit more bulk and some big damage. It's fire Terra typing as well, which is pretty nice.
Yeah.
It does, but then you want to have the Great Tusk not be in that game. So then that's the counter read of, does Z bring the Great Tusk and then try and deal with that King Gambit, hoping that that's the read that Nails makes.
Yeah, if Nails did bring King Gambit that game, I think Z would have had a much tougher time because it was pretty strong into the combination of Dragonite and Maushold and Iron Bundle. Again, like you said, it doesn't really want to take a Bitter Blade, but it is that Terra Fire type, so it can Terastallize away from that fire weakness. And one, take less damage, two, limit the healing on the Ceruledge, which I think is really big too.
I mean, it also does play in well, right? If you have this King Gambit, even if you're fearing taking something like an Earthquake or a Headlong Rush, if you bring Dragonite in the back, and then you can switch in Dragonite, stop yourself from getting any damage off from some sort of ground type attack from the Great Tusk, and then maybe allow for something else to deal some big damage to it. And I think that's probably the play that Nick is going to have to make if he wants to try and handle something like that Ceruledge, because these Ceruledge have kind of just been coming into this tournament unchecked.
Yeah, so far we haven't really seen a Ceruledge come on the field and get shut down, so Nails is going to have to do that. The Fluttermane not being able to use any of its attacks really is a bit of a downer for Nick too, just because it has a great opportunity to fire off a lot of damage into Z's team. Like if the Golden Ghost stays behind like it did in game 1, nothing resists the Fairy typing on Z's side of the field, so there's going to be some really big Dazzling Gleams or Moonblast coming at that Fluttermane should Nick find the space to keep Fluttermane safe for a turn or two.
Yeah, and not on the lead here, however, it is Great Tusk and Torkoal for Nick, Iron Bundle and Great Tusk. So a pretty speedy and a pretty slow Pokemon right opposite each other.
Yeah, the Iron Bundle and the Torkoal probably the fastest and the slowest things in the format.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Photosynthesis helping both of these Great Tusks, boosting both of their attack. Interesting to see, at least for the speeds, if they do speed tie, but you saw that Z's went first.
Yes. Yeah, that can be big information. We saw that the Great Tusk on Nick's end was also faster than Z's Ceruledge. That can tell you something about how through those Pokemon are trained. I think if you're Z, at worst, you know it's a speed tie, so that can be really helpful for you. Great Tusk in the mirror isn't super volatile just because you have, it's never going to knock itself out with any of its moves, but having the option to get some big ground damage onto that Torkoal from the start is going to be nice.
Yeah, especially, I could see probably some Protects plus Earthquakes on either side of the field if that's what these trainers end up choosing to go for, right? Not exactly Pokemon that are partnered with them that want to take something like a big Protect,
right?
Especially if you go for something like that ground Terastallization, but I feel like Nick might need to save his Terastallization for later in the game and find something a little bit more defensive to choose, unless you go for this big offensive output, in which case then you have to deal with some big attacks. But Iron Bundle protecting this turn, no Terastallization from either side of the field. Torkoal also going to protect this turn. Looks like we might be seeing 2 Earthquakes here, Jake, and that is going to be a great way to maybe do some damage. Headlong Rush actually into the Iron Bundle, so definitely making a bit of a call there. No damage, but you're not taking those drops either, most importantly. This Earthquake is going to be going off at this point. It looks like these two are definitely speed tying based on the way that the interactions have happened so far, something both of these trainers now know. This Earthquake going into the Great Tusk on the opposite side does just under half of that HP.
Just under half, but that should be enough for the Freeze Dry knockout, which is really nice for Z. I think one thing Z has been doing really well is just getting damage on the field when they can. That's been big for Iron Bundle KOs. It was big for the Ceruledge in the last game. That Earthquake, even though it didn't do a whole lot of damage, that damage is very significant.
Yeah, and I think at that point too, right, knowing that the Great Tusk speed tie definitely wants you to get the other one off of the field, preferably as quick as you can, having the opportunity. But no, looks like Nick says, I know that this is probably not looking great for me. Gonna bring in the Fluttermane instead, a Pokemon with very good special defense, very specially defensively bulky if it wants to take something like a Freeze Dry. Also gets this Photosynthesis boost to its special attack. The other Great Tusk also going to switch out here, trying to preserve some of these Pokemon. Ceruledge is the Pokemon to come in. Wondering if you were trying to predict something. To Torkoal also switching here.
3 switches.
3 switches. I think the Iron Bundle is the only one still hanging out, and the Lilligant has come in. So a switch up here from Nick on his side of the field. Iron Bundle's Freeze Dry into this Fluttermane. It'll handle it way better than that Great Tusk would have.
It certainly, but now it is threatened by a Shadow Sneak again. You know, from that first game, I imagine Shadow Sneak is very, very close to a KO, if not a guaranteed KO from this range. And the Lilligant here, actually really nice, because the Lilligant should be able to outspeed it certainly outspeeds the Ceruledge, and it should be able to fire off something like a Sleep Powder, if it's allowed to, though. If the Lilligant does underspeed that Iron Bundle with the booster energy, something like a Shadow Sneak and a Freeze Dry does threaten it. So even though the Lilligant comes in for free here, it really has to be careful about, when it chooses to go for a Sleep Powder, when it chooses to go for Leaf Storm if you need damage out of it. That Leaf Storm very threatening for the Iron Bundle as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to try and go for the after you, that may kind of be your plan, but I still think you probably underspeed here. Fluttermane is going to switch out. I think Nick sees the writing on the wall and has to play pretty positionally here if he wants to take this game. Great Tusk once again coming back in, if that is a sacrifice you're willing to make. Getting, again, these photosynthesis boosts, right? This is why Torkoal is so much fun for these teams with all the past Paradox Pokemon. Looks like here Z is going to be going for a Terastallization first before Nick does. Into the Cerulege is going to make it that Steel typing, which this Great Tusk is probably pretty happy to switch into, knowing that it could go for something like a super effective Headlong Rush or Earthquake, especially, Lilligant's got Protect. It can do some big damage. Protect this turn, though, so no damage output from Nick's side of the field, but you are stopping this Iron Bundle's Icy Wind from hitting into you. Will hit into this Great Tusk, though, and that will slow it down.
This is a really big Icy Wind. I was going to say, it allows the Great Tusk to be slower than the Cerulege, but it doesn't matter because Great Tusk just gets knocked out by that Icy Wind. That probably gives away that it's not holding the Assault Vest, which, I don't know, that's a big damage from that Icy Wind. I really like that play from Cerulege, though. It did go for that Bitter Blade into Lilligant, which did whiff into Protect, but still, that's a very safe Terastallization, just because if you want to leave this Cerulege in against the Fluttermane, you really don't want to be a Ghost type, which means that I don't know, you take less damage from the Shadow Ball, you're still resisting the Fairy moves, and unless you get put to sleep by the Lilligant, you have that opportunity to Bitter Blade off any damage.
That is a Choice Scarf Great Tusk.
It
so
sure
that
is.
Iron Icy Wind, was really important. Even if it didn't get the knockout, you're still dropping that speed, right?
Yeah.
Because having the Choice Scarf does kind of mess with the way that those speed tiers interact. Not an item we commonly see on Great Tusk either, but that means it does get knocked out pretty comfortably by that Icy Wind. That does not look like double target chip damage whatsoever. Looks like Nick already also going to match the Terastallizations here onto that Fluttermane. Is going to be that Fairy typing. Will help to boost some of this damage, but most importantly, it's going to stop that super effective damage from the Shadow Sneaks, like you said. And that's probably the biggest thing you can do here. Shadow Sneak from the Cerulege. It does have one bulk up, but it handles it so much better than it did in game one. Lilligant's Sleep Powder is faster than the Iron Bundle here. Is going to get put to sleep. That is an absolutely huge turn here for Nick to kind of get his way back into this game. Iron Bundle's already going to take that first turn of sleep, though, because it is slower. Shadow Ball targets down into this Cerulege. It is no longer a Ghost type, but it does take a lot of damage.
Big chunk of damage there. That's a very strong Fluttermane. We do see the Photosynthesis special attack boost, but I don't even think, is Sun still up? I think it is still, because of course Lilligant outspit the Iron Bundle. But we do see that big Shadow Ball damage because that Fluttermane is holding a Choice Specs. And so certainly anything left on the field for Z on this turn should get knocked out by that Choice Specs Shadow Ball. And the Lilligant being faster than Iron Bundle is huge. I know it sits in a range where it's very close to either outspeeding or not outspeeding, but big information for Nick there, knowing that Lilligant, well, I'm surely Nick knew that going in. Big information for me, because I just apparently didn't know that going in. But now this Lilligant, it still threatens with Sleep Powders, but more importantly, it threatens a Leaf Storm onto this Iron Bundle. It can no longer Terastallize into a Ghost type. To not take super effective damage from Leaf Storm, and Cerulege certainly can't knock it out in one hit because it is holding that Focus Sash.
Torkoal switches in here. Shadow Sneak once again darting down into this Torkoal, who has not taken any damage as of yet until this moment. Leaf Storm going off first into the Iron Bundle, enough for a one-hit knockout there, and that is absolutely huge. You can still you take that special attack drop, right? But you could still switch the Lilligant out, maybe switch it back in later. Torkoal now coming in one turn too late, though, as the sunlight has faded.
That's still a big turn, though, because Lilligant still has its Focus Sash intact. And now you have the option to Sleep Powder the Great Tusk. Great Tusk will certainly still take a lot of damage from Leaf Storm at -2. More importantly, you have the After You option on Torkoal, and you can't use a Fire move into Cerulege still because of that Flash Fire, but we have seen it is holding, it carries the move Earth Power, which will easily be able to knock out Cerulege from here. And in this case, if you knock out Cerulege and then you bring the Fluttermane back in, all you need is any kind of damage on Great Tusk to break that Sash, and then the Fluttermane can clean up. I think the Fluttermane, it's going to be very, very close as to whether one more Shadow Sneak would knock it out. I think from the Shadow Sneak damage we saw on the prior turn, I think Nick didn't want to risk that a Shadow Sneak KOs it, loses his Flutter Mane, which I think is very smart. But if the end game comes down to a Flutter Mane and a Ceruledge, it's going to be really close.
Lilligant is still faster than the Great Tusk, even without the sun up at this point. Puts the Great Tusk to sleep. Means as well there's no Shadow Sneak this turn either, so this might have been a play with a bulk up, but no, Bitter Blade is the move choice here into the Lilligant. Does bring it down to its Focus Sash. A lot of HP coming back here for this Ceruledge, and that means too, you're in Shadow Sneak range. You have 1
Certainly.
HP. You are in Shadow Sneak range. No problem there. Earth Power from the Torkoal targeting into the Ceruledge. Super effective damage. Not enough damage whatsoever here, and I don't think that's what Nick wanted to see.
Absolutely not. That's really rough. The Earth Power, Torkoal's not known for having very naturally high special attack. It really relies on the sun to boost its fire type moves. So unfortunately that Earth Power not enough to pick up the knockout after that Bitter Blade healing. And that's a really big turn from Z too, because if Nick had opted to sleep powder the Ceruledge, then you have to deal with the Ceruledge getting knocked out by Earth Power. The Great Tusk is now, can wake up now. It still has that chance to stay asleep for another turn or two. But as long as that Focus Sash gets broken, again, this becomes a situation where Flutter Mane can KO it as long as Ceruledge doesn't knock it out with Shadow Sneak, but in this case, Shadow Sneak still threatens Lilligant. There's a lot of things that can go wrong here on both ends, just because the Ceruledge having that priority move is really, really big.
Looks like no switches here. Lilligant is going to protect this turn. A pretty safe call when you only have 1 HP left.
Yeah.
Shadow Sneak into that Lilligant, not going to go through that protect there. And Great Tusk stays asleep this turn. This means that it is Torkoal's time to shine.
Yeah, absolutely.
With another Earth Power on the Ceruledge, it's enough for the knockout, and that is pretty huge. If you are Nick, you still have a chance to switch your Pokemon around, maybe get the sun back up for whatever Z is hiding in the back, which Nick currently does not know, but we know is Dragonite.
Yes, we see the Dragonite coming in. The Dragonite, again, it's one of those things that does not care about Lilligant or Torkoal's damage at all. It double resists that Leaf Storm. It's immune to Earth Power. It'll take some damage from Fire type moves, but it is very bulky and it has that natural Fire resist with that Dragon typing. And because it is so bulky and is holding that Assault Vest, it can probably even take an attack from this Choice Spec Flutter Mane. Maybe not if the multi-scale gets broken, but it does still have that Extreme Speed, which is also huge because the Flutter Mane did Terrastabilize off of that Ghost typing, which means it should be able to get knocked out by 1 Extreme Speed.
Looks like here Flutter Mane switching in for Torkoal, probably trying to take a knockout on that Lilligant, bring the Torkoal back in and get that special defense boost. Lilligant went for that double protect though, not going to get it, no chance with that 33% opportunity. Does take the Extreme Speed and get knocked out here. You have to hope right now that your Great Tusk wakes up and you can maybe get some big damage off, but no, not this turn, currently still fast asleep.
It is still asleep, but I don't think that matters a whole lot, just because we will definitely be able to see the Dragonite take this KO on Flutter Mane. There's no protect on it, there's no redirection on the Torkoal's end, and Torkoal does not threaten this Dragonite at all. So I think what Nick was going for there is, if you're able to get that double protect, that means that you're not going to get knocked out. You have the Flutter Mane that comes in safely as long as the Great Tusk stays asleep, which it did. So Nick going for that 1 in 3 chance there to give himself an out here, because if you have the Flutter Mane and the Lilligant on the field, it's a much less clear end game for Z, whereas now you just Extreme Speed, you let the Great Tusk sit until it wakes up to get a big headlong rush off, or you can just win with Dragonite.
I don't know, maybe there's some sort of world where an eruption, critical hit, all that stuff, right? Looks like Great Tusk wakes up this turn, though, able to get that super effective damage off with the headlong rush into the Torkoal, easily enough to get the knockout thanks to that little bit of chip, but probably enough as a one-hit knockout anyway. That means that Z is going to be moving on undefeated and going to have a great day 2 tomorrow, now that they have definitely locked in their spot. Nick still has definitely a chance, just has to win one of their